By the third month of municipal lockdown, Ben Chen had become part of the Yunshan Imperial Necropolis at night, another silhouette cut into stone and shadow. He moved through the corridors in body armor that never quite warmed, even after 6-hour rounds. The mountain held its own weather, cool, minerals stale with filtered air and old lacquer. Every footstep seemed to travel ahead of him, strike the vaulted ceiling, and come back smaller. The dead did not answer, but they were never silent. Yunshan was not a romantic ruin with candlelit chambers and tourist placards. It was a state-protected conservation site carved into granite, wrapped in modern systems and legal language. 17 sealed lacquer coffins rested in Chamber 3 under humidity grids, calibrated to decimal points. Pressure sensors lined the plinths. Fiber optic cameras watched every angle, including the negative spaces between coffin stands where thieves liked to hide tools. Even the mop closets had access logs. Before lockdown, the night shift had 6 people, rotating 2-person patrol patterns with a control room supervisor and an on-call response team in the city. Quarantine protocols cut that to 3, then 2. Budget freezes did the rest. If a sensor tripped now, there was no rapid response unit coming up the mountain in 12 minutes. There was Ben, a technician asleep in a maintenance dorm, if he was lucky, and whoever answered the municipal hotline. Ben preferred it that way in theory. Fewer voices, fewer mistakes. In practice, isolation sharpened old habits he had spent years trying to blunt. He checked corners no one could enter. He memorized sight lines down corridors that ended at sealed stone. He logged each door closure by sound as much as by the indicator light. Heavy steel had a different pitch if the latch caught imperfectly. In another life, those habits had kept him and his squad alive through alleys lined with concrete and satellite dishes and laundry lines. In that life, he had still failed to keep civilians from being caught in crossfire. One afternoon he replayed whenever the necropolis lights dimmed. Guarding the dead felt cleaner. No one screamed in these halls. No one begged him to choose. His radio language never changed. North vestibule clear. Humidity variance 0.03, chamber 2. Request remote unlock, service hatch delta. Clipped phrases, no extras. The younger guards who trained with him in daylight called him Stonewall when they thought he couldn't hear. At night, he let the name fit. Stone did not panic, did not speculate, did not ask for comfort. He did, however, keep private lists. List 1 was operational. Sensors with intermittent latency, cameras overdue for lens cleaning, doors whose seals wore faster in dry weather. List 2 was human, who came late, who repeated keys under their breath before entering a code, who looked at storage maps too long. Lockdown made everyone tired, and tired people either made mistakes or hid them. On Monitor 4, Chamber 3 sat in grayscale stillness. Coffin row A through Q, each lacquer lid dark and glossy under low conservation lighting. The seals were centuries old and state-documented down to adhesive chemistry. Breaking one was a crime against national heritage and, in practical terms, a career-ending scandal for everyone in the management chain. Those coffins were why inspectors came, why ministers gave speeches, why budgets appeared and disappeared with political weather. To the administrators, Ben was a reliable ex-combat security specialist hired to protect irreplaceable assets from theft and vandalism. To Ben, the assignment was less noble and more exact. Hold this perimeter, this time without failing. At 1:50, he began routine sterilization prep. During lockdown, every occupied corridor underwent UV and aerosol cycles in scheduled windows. The cycle always did the same thing to the system for 1 minute and 40 seconds, rerouted power to high-load ventilation fans, and dimmed corridor lights to reserve current. Security had argued against it. Facilities had called it non-negotiable. Ben had signed the risk memo with an annotation: increased camera gain compensations in low-light intervals. It was still pending. At 2:11, he stood in control, drinking vending machine coffee that tasted faintly of bleach from the paper cup. At 2:12, the sterilization sequence started in Wing C. Lights in 3 corridors softened from white to bruised amber. The feed on monitor 4 shifted tone as the thermal overlay compensated. At 2:13, something narrow and human-shaped moved between coffins H and J. Not across the foreground where glare could smear edges. Between the stands, where no movement should have existed at all. The figure was wrong in 2 ways at once. Too smooth, as if gliding without footfall, and too deliberate, pausing half a beat at the midpoint before slipping out of frame. The chamber door status remained green-locked. No access ping, no alarm. Ben put the cup down without finishing. Control to all interior units. Initiate internal lockdown protocol, Charlie, he said, already moving. Freeze position. Confirm location. Only one sleepy voice answered from upper archive level. Unit 2. North mezzanine. Stationary. No one was in Chamber 3. No one should have been on that floor except Ben. He keyed his badge at the stairwell and took the steps 2 at a time, boots striking steel treads with the rhythm of drills he had not run in years. His pulse narrowed his vision the way combat had trained it to do. Door, corner, vent, blind spot, repeat. Chamber 3's outer gate showed sealed. He scanned in, opened, and entered with flashlight low and sidearm, holstered but unsnapped. 17 coffins stood where history had left them and bureaucracy had preserved them. Black lacquer, red undertones where the light caught, brass fittings dulled by controlled atmosphere. The air smelled of resin and stone dust. He swept left, right, behind each plinth. Nothing. No body heat anomalies on his handheld thermal scanner, no tool marks on locks, no cloth fibers snagged at the gate. He crouched to inspect floor sensors for hairline lifting. None. Motion detectors were live, green. He checked ceiling vents and service grills, then ran the perimeter of the rear wall where utility conduits fed humidity controls. A narrow access panel sat waist-high, supposedly sealed with tamper tape after maintenance the previous week. The tape was intact at first glance. At second glance, one edge showed a tiny crescent lift, then reseal, as if someone had peeled and pressed carefully with a gloved thumb. Ben touched it with the back of his finger. The adhesive held, but weaker than factory set. He photographed the panel, measured the tape offset against the frame with a ruler from his kit, and logged time. 2:21. Possible panel interference. Chamber 3 rear utility bank. He completed the rest of the sweep because procedure required the whole circuit even when instinct wanted to camp one clue. Archive corridor, ventilation spine, emergency egress, then back to control to replay the feed. At normal speed, the shadow was there and gone in less than 2 seconds. Frame by frame, it looked almost thinner, like a human outline cut from smoke. He checked logins. No authorized staff entries to Chamber 3. Personnel roster showed the only authorized night staff on site as Ben and Unit 2, both badge-tracked elsewhere during the moment. 2 conservators and acting director Dr. Liao were logged in the administrative wing 2 floors above, reviewing audit paperwork. By 3:10, he filed an incident report with attached stills, footage, and panel photos marked for immediate review. At 9:40, after day's shift turnover, Dr. Liao summoned him to conference room B. She wore a surgical mask and nitrile gloves, despite distance protocols already in place, and she had 3 tablets open: audit checklist, staffing matrix, incident queue. Her eyes looked strained above the mask, either from too little sleep or too many screens. "Mr. Chen," she said, formal as always. "I reviewed your overnight report." Ben stayed standing. "Yes, Director." "Acting Director," she corrected automatically, then exhaled as if annoyed at herself for caring about the distinction. The visual anomaly occurred during UV sterilization and power dim. Facilities confirms occasional thermal distortion when shutters rotate. "It moved with human profile," Ben said, "and we found tamper tape disturbance on a utility panel adjacent to Coffin Row. Minor adhesive shift is not evidence of intrusion. It's evidence of contact." She tapped the tablet, bringing up the still image. "It's evidence of someone touching tape at some point in the last week. We are 72 hours from a national conservation audit under lockdown conditions, with staff shortages, delayed grants, and municipal officials looking for any justification to reduce site access. I cannot authorize a full internal panic over optical noise. I requested investigation, not panic." Her gaze hardened. "Then use language that reflects that. Your report uses the phrase unidentified moving figure in sealed chamber. If this is forwarded uncontextualized, it becomes gossip by lunchtime and a leak by evening. No journalists are allowed on site." "Leaks do not require journalists on site, Mr. Chen." He recognized the cadence, briefing room flattening, the bureaucratic equivalent of incoming fire. Control the narrative, contain the risk, defer the truth. He had heard officers use that tone before after civilian casualties, when words became sandbags. Dr. Liao lowered her voice. "Amend the report to possible optical interference during sterilization cycle, pending technical verification. Keep patrols normal. No extra lockdown drills before inspectors arrive. We need stability." Behind her, through the glass wall, Ben could see contracted Security Chief Gao Ren in the hall, broad smile visible even under his mask from the way his eyes narrowed. Gao lifted 2 fingers in a half-wave, then checked his phone and turned away. Ben looked back at Dr. Liao. "If this was a test run, they'll come back." If who was a test run? He had no name, only a shape and a peeled strip of tape. "Unknown." "Exactly." She closed the tablet. "We cannot chase phantoms right now. I need you focused on actual threats." The meeting ended with no raised voices and no concession. Ben sent a revised summary line as ordered, adding nothing and deleting nothing else. The original report remained in the archive under his credentials, time-stamped and unedited. By evening, rumors still moved faster than policy. Unit 2 asked whether someone had seen a ghost near the Imperial Coffins. A conservator avoided Chamber 3 entirely and asked to swap to ceramic storage. Facilities requested another sterilization cycle extension to reduce microbial burden before audit, which meant another dim light window. Ben did not answer the ghost jokes. He checked badge logs twice. What was at risk was easy to count on paper and impossible to replace in reality. The 17 sealed coffins held organic materials that had survived 2 millennia, by chance and then by science. Lacquer layers, woven bindings, trace pigments that could vanish under one careless humidity spike. They were legal heritage objects and political symbols. Damage to one seal would trigger an international storm, parliamentary hearings, accusations of neglect, accusations of theft, and probably new laws written by people who had never walked a conservation corridor. The site also held newer finds in temporary quarantine storage, pending catalog entry, crates of ceramics, textile fragments, bronze pieces still wearing excavation soil. Under normal conditions, outside forensic teams could be called for anomalies. Under lockdown, outside access required municipal clearance that took days if granted at all. Evidence aged while forms circulated. Whoever exploited that lag would not need to be invisible, only patient. And there was this. If something happened now, there would be no neutral public record from visiting media, no rapid, independent witnesses. Official narratives would harden before facts did. Ben had lived through that kind of vacuum once already, watching people who never smelled the smoke decide what really happened. For him personally, failure had a familiar shape. It was not losing a job. It was standing in a corridor after the noise ended, knowing he had seen signs and not pushed hard enough. The necropolis had given him a contained battlefield. Doors, logs, sensors, protocols. Ignore one anomaly and the old verdict returned. Near midnight, he walked alone to Chamber 3 and stood at the outer gate without entering. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the lacquer coffins waiting under low light, motionless as verdicts. He reviewed the next sterilization schedule on his tablet. 210, Wing C, same window. He opened maintenance access records and requested raw, uncompressed camera backups for the previous 7 nights under routine Data Integrity Audit Authority. No special flags, nothing that needed Dr. Liao's approval. He submitted a second request for sensor mode change logs, citing calibration checks. Then he created a private notebook entry, encrypted under his own key, 0213 anomaly unresolved. Tamper indicator likely deliberate. Assume internal facilitation possible. Investigate quietly. No leaks, no assumptions. He looked once more at the panel where the tape had lifted and resealed. In lockdown, there were no second teams coming up the mountain, no extra eyes, no second chances for objects that could not be remade. If someone was moving inside his perimeter, they were counting on exhaustion, hierarchy, and the fear of embarrassment to do half the work for them. Ben turned off his flashlight, let the corridor fall to conservation dim, and began his round again. He reached the junction where the corridor split toward Chamber 3 and the rear service spine, paused in the dark long enough for his eyes to adjust, and listened. Air handlers. Distant relay click. No footsteps. Ben finished the loop, returned to control, and locked the door behind him before he sat. The raw backups he had requested were waiting in a queue, each file tagged with checksum hashes and a warning banner about storage load. He started with the 7 nights of Chamber 3 thermal overlays, then pulled UV shutter telemetry, humidity logs, and motion sensor mode states into the same timeline. At 047, coffee gone cold beside his keyboard, he found the first hard fracture in the official story. At 2:06, on the night of the anomaly, Chamber 3's motion sensors had been switched from active to passive mode for 7 minutes and 12 seconds. The command had come through Maintenance Console M3, authenticated by badge IDLW1182. Li Wei, Night Electronics Technician, badge LW1182, was in mandatory home quarantine 14 kilometers away after his wife tested positive. Ben opened the roster and checked twice. Quarantine status confirmed by Municipal Health, QR logs, daily check-ins, geofence intact. Li Wei had not been on site in 9 days. He pulled door records for console M3's location, service alcove east of Chamber 3. The alcove door never opened that hour. No handle alert, no latch fault. Remote command then. Or clone credential injected through an internal terminal. He copied the logs to an encrypted folder and sent a single-line message to Li Wei through official staff chat. Need confirmation. Was your badge in your possession at 2:06 last night? Reply when awake. No emojis, no explanation. At 1:12, Unit 2 knocked and leaned in with his mask, pulled under his chin, young face sallow from fluorescent light. Chief, sorry. Facilities filed another duct access request for Wing C, third one this week. Reason? Persistent particulate drift in chamber-adjacent vents. Signed by Contractor Team 4. Who approved? Unit 2 checked the tablet. Acting Director and Gao Ren. Ben held out his hand. Unit 2 passed the tablet over. The request window overlapped the same UV sterilization interval as the previous night. Deny until I review in person, Ben said. Unit 2 hesitated. Gao says delays violate maintenance contract. Let Gao call me. When Unit 2 left, Ben pulled the maintenance ledger and found something worse. 2 work orders for the same duct segment. One marked urgent, one marked deferred. Both carrying Dr. Liao's digital signature, with different timestamps 15 minutes apart. One of those signatures was either forged or backdated through admin privileges. The municipal curfew had already gutted normal escalation channels. Outside forensic support required city clearance, and city clearance required an incident category Dr. Liao refused to assign. Ben could either sit on anomalies until audit day or work inside the site's own contaminated system and risk stepping outside protocol. He kept working. By dawn, he had a suspect map that felt less like an investigation and more like a minefield. Conservator Lin Xiaoyu, assigned to organic artifacts, had requested unscheduled inventory views of temporary quarantine crates adjacent to Chamber 3. Twice. She knew the storage maps too well for someone who claimed she avoided that wing after hearing ghost stories. Contractor Team 4 had filed repeated ductwork requests focused on service routes that bypassed main camera corridors. Dr. Liao's approvals contradicted each other, and Gao Ren, head of contracted security, kept writing in all caps about operational normalization. At 8:03, Li Wei finally replied with a shaky voice message recorded from his apartment kitchen. Mr. Chen, badge is in my desk drawer. Has been since quarantine started. I haven't logged in remotely either. Last night, around 2, my phone got 2 system authentication prompts. I thought it was auto-sync and dismissed. Should I have reported? Ben played it twice, then called him on encrypted audio. Don't report to anyone else yet, Ben said. Take photos of your badge front and back, timestamp visible. Send to me and HR simultaneously. Li Wei swallowed audibly. Is this about Chamber 3? It's about credential misuse. Stay available. He ended the call and felt the old pressure settle between his shoulder blades, the one that meant the perimeter had already been tested more than once. By late afternoon, Yunshan felt less like a conservation site and more like a stage where everyone had memorized different scripts. Lin Xiaoyu stood in the quarantine storeroom doorway with a clipboard pressed to her chest, gloved fingers white at the knuckles. I need confirmation those bronze trays were reboxed after fumigation, she said when Ben approached. The humidity tags are inconsistent. Bronze trays? Root tablets, she corrected quickly. Administrative term. Small bronzes from Sector 9 excavation. Ben watched her eyes flick to the shelf row beyond him, then to the camera dome overhead. Why are you checking those yourself? Because catalog is delayed, and if labels drift now, we lose provenance later. Her voice sharpened. Do you want a theft report because 2 crates got swapped by interns? I don't. No interns had been on site for weeks. He stepped aside so she could pass, and she did. Too fast, almost brushing him. The clipboard shielding the lower half of her body as if she were carrying something. Ben stopped her with a flat palm in the air. Clipboard. She froze. Excuse me? Set it on the table. She obeyed, angry now. It held only printed inventories and humidity stickers. No drive, no tools. I'm not your suspect board, Mr. Chen, she said quietly. I'm trying to keep artifacts from being ruined while everyone pretends budgets are real. Then she added, without looking at him, if you're smart, you watch the people who ask for duct access right before sterilization. She walked off before he could answer. At 18:20, Gao Ren arrived in control uninvited, smelling faintly of menthol and expensive sanitizer. He closed the door with deliberate softness. You denied Team 4 again, Gao said. That's the second disruption in 48 hours. Pending security verification. Gao smiled with no warmth. Your report already says optical interference, correct? Acting director, and I appreciate your cooperation there. Let's not reverse that maturity by improvising crisis. Ben didn't stand. Motion sensors were switched passive with cloned credentials. Allegedly cloned. Or technician error. Or software lag. Lockdown is full of glitches. Glitches don't file targeted duct requests. Gao's smile thinned. You're seeing patterns because you want one villain. This isn't your old deployment, Chen. There are no insurgents in a tomb. The word deployment landed like a thumb pressed into scar tissue. Gao continued, voice lower. Audit team arrives in 2 days. If they perceive instability, funding suffers. Contracts freeze. Staff layoffs. Your people lose shifts. Sometimes leadership means absorbing uncertainty, not escalating it. Sometimes leadership means not burying evidence. For a beat, Gao's expression hardened into something almost naked. Contempt, maybe fear. Then the smile returned. I'll be direct. Amend your supplemental note removing credential cloning until IT confirms. I can make that easy for you. And if I don't, then I document insubordination and fitness concerns. You've had episodes. I've heard stories. Ben stared at him. From who? People talk. Gao tapped the monitor frame with 2 fingers, friendly as a metronome. Normalize operations, Chief. Don't create security theater. When he left, Ben realized his jaw hurt from clenching. He typed a fresh entry in his private notebook. Pressure applied to alter language. Threat. Fitness narrative. Treat Gao as active obstruction at minimum. That night he did not sleep. He tried. In the barracks room above the loading bay, he lay on his back and counted air handler cycles until the ceiling became another ceiling from years ago, cracked plaster lit by tracer flashes through a shattered window. He sat up before the memory finished, breathing through his nose, palms on his knees, until the present returned. Concrete, locker, folded uniform, quiet mountain. At 1:40, he gave up on sleep and returned to control. If someone was manipulating light to create that shadow, the answer had to be in raw frames, not processed feeds. Ben disabled auto enhancement and rebuilt the 213 event from synchronized sources. Camera 3A thermal, Camera 3B grayscale, UV shutter rotation data, and corridor lux readings. At first pass, the shadow still looked like movement between coffins. At 10th pass, he noticed it began 1 frame before the shutter angle crossed 47 degrees. At 20th pass, he overlaid lacquer reflectivity from conservation scans done last year and saw it. The figure was not a body occluding heat. It was an occlusion pattern projected by rotating UV shutters, stretched across polished coffin surfaces at a precise angle so it appeared to glide between plinths. A ghost cut from geometry, a deliberate misdirection. He reran adjacent corridor feeds at the same timestamp and found, buried in gain noise, a brief thermal dip in the rear service spine, exactly where camera sightlines were weakest during sterilization dim. Not a person on camera, just displaced air and a pressure fluctuation near access hatch R9. He checked sensor logs for R9. No alarm. Then he checked mode states. R9 pressure strip. Passive for 7 minutes and 12 seconds. Same window. Same cloned badge. Ben leaned back and shut his eyes once, hard. The moving shadow had done its job perfectly. Draw eyes to the sacred coffins while activity moved through the spine behind them. He pulled temporary quarantine inventory for the chamber-adjacent storeroom. Ceramics, textiles, 2 sealed lacquer fragments, and a crate group listed as BRZ-RTE/S9. 12 bronze root tablets, recently excavated, conservation pending, dimensions small enough to fit in a courier case, small enough to disappear during a routine maintenance transit. He went to the storeroom himself at 2:32 with a body cam running. The crate seals were intact by barcode and wax dot, but on crate 3, beneath the printed quarantine tape, a corner had been lifted and pressed back so neatly it would pass a casual check, exactly like the utility panel tape in Chamber 3. Testing access, not taking yet. He photographed everything, then did something he had avoided for 3 days. He asked Dr. Liao to meet him off-record. She arrived in the records room at 3:05, hair tied back too tight, mask creased from long wear. "This had better be brief," she said. "I have audit calls at 6. Ben turned his tablet so she could see the synchronized overlays. Shutter angle, projected occlusion, service spine pressure, strip passive, clone badge auth, and the crate seal close-up. Her eyes tracked each item, then stopped on the line where her digital signature approved Team 4 duct access during the compromised window. "That signature isn't mine," she said first. "One of them is." Silence stretched long enough for the wall clock relay to click twice. "If you're accusing me, I'm asking who forced these approvals." Her shoulders dropped a fraction, then held there as if she had set down something heavy, but still expected it to fall on her feet. "You don't understand the context," she said. "Then explain it." She laughed once, flat and exhausted. "Context is this: 3 months of lockdown, frozen grants, staff begging for hazard pay we can't cover, my mother's dialysis no longer fully reimbursed after my husband lost his job. Context is one procedural error from last year. Humidity data backfilled during sensor outage, so we wouldn't lose accreditation while waiting for replacement probes. Wrong? Yes. Career ending, if public." Ben kept his voice level. "Gao knows." She nodded, eyes on the tablet, not on him. He found the discrepancy during contract renewal. Said he could protect institutional stability if I signed targeted maintenance approvals and stopped security from generating incident noise before audit. He said if I refused, the falsification would go to the ministry and I'd be removed immediately. No post, no insurance continuity. Insurance continuity. Family medical coverage. The leverage point was uglier for being ordinary. "How long?" Ben asked. 6 weeks. At first I thought he just wanted smoother contractor billing. Then the access patterns narrowed to Wing C, and I realized. She swallowed. "I realized too late." "Why not come to me?" "Because you were already filing anomaly reports and getting labeled dramatic. Because if I gambled and lost, my staff still got cut and my family lost treatment. Because fear makes cowards out of people who think they're principled." She looked up then, and the shame in her face was real enough to hurt. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Ben zoomed to tomorrow's maintenance calendar. Another filter blackout was already scheduled for 2:10, Wing C. "I need you to do nothing visible," he said. "Keep the schedule unchanged. Approve what Gao expects. But from now on, every access order routes through me in parallel, timestamp preserved. No edits, no verbal side channels." She hesitated. "That's not enough for investigators." "It's enough to catch them in motion." He straightened, feeling the shift happen inside him, away from solo patrol instincts toward controlled setup. Not chasing shadows anymore. Building a trap. "Can you hold steady?" he asked. Dr. Liao nodded once, brittle but firm. "Yes." "Then we stop reacting. We make them commit." Outside, the necropolis ventilation changed pitch as the next sterilization cycle cued, a low mechanical inhale rolling through stone corridors lined with sealed coffins and temporary crates that had suddenly become the real battlefield. Ben stayed in records with Dr. Liao until they had a protocol that looked boring on paper and dangerous in practice. Every authorization tied to Wing C would now generate 2 trails: the official route through facilities software, and a shadow capture routed to an obsolete environmental logger in archive sublevel, a machine so old no one bothered to patch or monitor it. Ben wrote a script that copied badge IDs, mode changes, and camera power states in 10-second intervals, then salted each packet with hash stamps. If logs disappeared from the main server, the ghost machine would still remember. At 3:41, while he was testing packet integrity, Gao escalated. An all-staff bulletin dropped into every terminal. "Urgent, bioaerosol spike detected Wing C. Immediate deep cycle disinfection authorized. Security command transferred to contract lead Gao Ren under emergency continuity clause. Non-essential staff restricted from inner corridors." Ben read it once, then again slower. The clause was real, buried in pandemic amendments no one expected to trigger. It let contracted security assume temporary operational command during declared contamination events. "Did you authorize this?" he asked. Dr. Liao shook her head too quickly. "No bioaerosol alert reached me." He filed directly through facilities emergency channel. Then he just bought himself legal cover. And he had changed the timing for the next cycle tomorrow night. Deep cycle blackout at 1:20, not 2:10. Pulled an hour earlier, off the schedule Ben and Liao had discussed in the records room. By 4, Team 4 was already moving carts through the lower service entrance. New faces mixed in with known contractors, all in identical Tyvek coveralls with municipal disinfection patches. One patch was stitched crooked, another had no serial thread under UV, fake badges or borrowed uniforms, maybe both. Ben stopped one man at the scanner. "Mask up! Show credential!" The man lifted his wrist. Temporary visitor QR signed by Gao, valid for Wing C maintenance. The code verified green. Ben scanned the tool case the man wheeled behind him. Density readout bloomed white over one compartment, heavy shielding plate, thicker than normal instrument housing. "Why lead lining for filter service?" Ben asked. The man answered without hesitation. "Radiation meter transport." Yunshan had no radiological systems in Wing C. Before Ben could push further, Gao's voice came over corridor speakers, calm and amplified. "Chief Chen, report to Outer Gate for a municipal transfer inspection." "Repeat, Outer Gate now." Ben keyed his radio. "Inner screening in progress." "Negative," Gao replied. "You are reassigned pending review of procedural irregularities from last shift. Hand inner post to Unit 2. Pending review." He moved anyway, watched Team 4 roll past, and felt the operation tilt away from him in real time. If Gao pulled this off, the loss would not be one stolen crate. It would be the narrative: contamination event, reduced staffing, incomplete logs, unstable security lead, reassigned for cause. By dawn, the bronzes would be gone, and any objection would sound like a disgruntled officer refusing orders. Worse, if they needed cover, they could damage one coffin seal and bury theft under a national scandal. One broken seal would swallow every other fact. Ben reached Outer Gate at 4:19 and found no municipal transfer truck, no paperwork, no one waiting. Just floodlights on a wet pavement and a camera panning the checkpoint in slow mechanical arcs. A holding pattern. Keep him away from Wing C. He called Dr. Liao on secure line. She answered in a whisper. He's in control. He locked me out of command functions and cited contamination protocol. I can still view read-only. Can you see Chamber 3 feeds? Intermittent. Cameras are dropping to maintenance placeholders every 30 seconds. He pictured the service spine blind spots widening like breathing. Push everything you can to the shadow logger, he said. And don't challenge him in open channel. Ben, her voice caught, then steadied. If this goes wrong, he'll make you the culprit. He already started. He ended the call and walked back inside anyway. The next night, at 0:58, hours after the false bioaerosol alert had been formalized into yesterday's incident stack, the first failure came from his own side. Ben convinced Unit 2, real name Zhao Min, to check the East Service alcove and confirm whether console M3 was physically manned. Zhao was young, nervous, eager to prove he was more than corridor muscle. He nodded fast, repeated the route, and disappeared into the lower stairwell. 30 seconds later, his body cam feed went black. Ben ran. He found Zhao in the alcove, conscious, but on his knees, one glove dark with blood from a deep cut across his palm. The maintenance console door was open. Someone had forced his hand against an exposed sheet metal edge, then slammed the door shut before he could pull free. No cameras in the alcove. Maintenance exemption. Who did this? Ben asked, wrapping a pressure bandage. Zhao's face had gone gray. 2 suits, disinfection tags. I challenged access. They said Gao cleared. I reached for radio and... He swallowed hard. I didn't see their faces. Ben got him to infirmary and watched the nurse start sutures with shaking hands. Zhao would need tendon evaluation in the city after curfew lifted. He would not hold a rifle or a scanner tonight. Cost, immediate and physical. By 1:12, Gao filed the incident as self-inflicted injury during unauthorized interference with contracted maintenance. He copied HR, facilities, and municipal oversight. Ben tried to pull the raw hallway feed to dispute it and hit a blank directory. All camera files from 040 onward in Wing C had been purged from primary storage under an admin token carrying Dr. Liao's credentials. He turned to her in the records room. Did you? No. She looked sick. I can prove I was on a video call with audit liaisons at that minute. Proof won't matter if the server log says you deleted. The shadow logger should have preserved duplicates. Ben accessed archive sublevel remotely and got a single-line response. Device unreachable. Network node physically disconnected. He stood there staring at the text while the mountain hummed around him. Weeks of caution gone because someone walked into a forgotten room and unplugged a cable. At 1:19, blackout began early again. Ben attempted manual reroute to backup infrared and got lockout. His security admin rights had been downgraded to perimeter only. Every command he sent bounced. Insufficient privilege. On paper, he was now the guard at the gate while the theft route ran behind him. He took the stairs to Wing C anyway, arrived at the blast door, and slammed his palm on mechanical release. It did not move. A fresh seal strip crossed the manual crank housing, stamped with contamination warning and Gao's authorization code. Breaking it without witness would hand Gao exactly what he wanted. Unstable former soldier violates biohazard protocol. He broke it. Metal shrieked. The crank gave half a turn, then jammed. Someone had removed the internal clutch pin. He could not open from this side. From somewhere beyond the door came the muted clatter of a rolling case. Ben sprinted around through the long corridor detour and hit chamber-adjacent quarantine at 131, just as overhead lights rose from blackout amber to conservation white. Team 4 was exiting in orderly pairs, masks on, clipboards out, exactly the pace of men with nothing to hide. Their cases were closed. Their gloves looked clean. "Open them," Ben said. A contractor lifted his brows. "Under whose authority?" "Mine." Gao appeared behind them, hands spread in performance comm. "Chief Chen is off inner command tonight. Everyone proceed." Ben stepped in front of the nearest cart. For a second, he considered drawing his sidearm just to freeze the corridor. Then he saw 3 fixed cameras overhead and imagined the report already written: armed escalation by psychologically unfit guard during contamination event. He moved aside. After Team 4 cleared, Ben and Dr. Liao entered the quarantine room together. Crates BRZ-RTE/S9 sat on the shelf row, seals apparently intact. Barcodes matched manifest. Wax dots looked untouched, unless you knew where to look. Ben cut one seal under body cam and lifted the lid. Inside, foam partitions held 12 tablet-shaped bundles wrapped in inert paper. He scanned weight against catalog. Crate 3 read 1.8 kilograms under expected mass. He unwrapped bundle 7 and found a cast resin blank coated with excavation dust. Not stolen cleanly, then replaced with trash. Mocked. Dr. Liao made a small sound like air leaving a punctured lung. Ben looked at her and saw the exact moment calculation gave way to dread. 1 tablet gone meant the network had already completed a transfer. They could have moved all 11 remaining at any window they chose. And now there was no clean evidence trail left to prove when, by whom, or through which corridor. At 2:10, HR sent Ben a formal notice. Effective immediately. Temporary suspension of armed status, pending fitness assessment, and review of repeated protocol deviations. Report to outer post until further instruction. Weapon surrender within 30 minutes. Real loss. Not symbolic. He placed his sidearm on the armory counter, signed the chain of custody form, and felt naked in a way armor never fixed. After dawn, Dr. Liao sat alone in Office C and locked the door with both hands because one was shaking. The blinds were half open. Beyond them, the mountain morning was colorless, mist caught in pine branches, the kind of quiet tourist called spiritual in brochures. Her inbox stacked itself with polite disasters. Audit reminders, staffing shortages, legal advisories about contamination reporting language. Somewhere in the building, a floor polisher whined and stopped and whined again. She opened the secure folder she had not touched in months. The humidity backfill from last year, the spreadsheet she had altered when probes failed and replacement parts got stuck in procurement for 12 days. At the time, it had felt temporary, a bridge over bureaucracy. Fix the data when sensors returned. Submit corrected metadata. Nobody harmed. Then her mother's dialysis schedule changed. Insurance denied 2 sessions pending review. Liao called 3 offices, spent hours in hold music, signed forms she did not understand, learned exactly how quickly a salary could become a line between treatment and none. When Gao found the falsification, he did not shout or threaten at first. He brought tea into her office, set down a printed copy of the spreadsheet, and said almost kindly, "Directors survive by choosing which fires to report." She had chosen wrong every week since. Now one bronze tablet was gone, maybe already halfway to an offshore buyer, and Ben Chen, who still said please to janitorial staff and never once used her mistake as leverage, had surrendered his weapon because she had been afraid. She pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes until points of light bloomed. When she lowered them, she saw Ben through the narrow glass panel in her door, waiting but not entering. "Come in," she said, and hated how hoarse she sounded. He stepped inside, carrying no tablet, no files. Without the sidearm, the line of his hips looked wrong, unfinished. "They suspended your armed status," she said. "Yes. Because of me. Because of Gao." She gave a bitter laugh. "You still do that. Precision language even now. It matters." She looked at him then fully, and for once did not perform authority. "I am terrified," she said. "Not of losing this job. Of my mother missing treatment if I do. Of my staff being punished for my signatures. Of telling the truth and watching nothing improve. And I am ashamed that the thing I fear most today is that you'll walk away and leave me to clean this up alone." The words landed between them, raw and irreversible. Ben's expression shifted. Not softer exactly, but less armored. "I'm not leaving." "You should. Anyone rational would." I stopped pretending to be rational when someone started swapping national artifacts for resin and calling it maintenance. Despite herself, she almost smiled. It broke into something else, and she turned away, shoulders hitching once before she mastered it. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "My father excavated looted sites in the 90s, she said. "He used to say theft happens twice, once when the object is taken, and again when records are rewritten so no one can prove it existed where it did. I thought administration was how to prevent that second theft. Instead, I helped it." Ben stepped closer but did not touch her. "Then help stop the next one." She nodded, wiped her face with the back of her glove, and pulled up a blank document. "If I make a full statement naming Gao and the officials he referenced, I need it to survive if I'm locked out of systems." "It will? And if they arrest me?" "I'll keep the chain intact." She believed him. That was the dangerous part, and the part that felt like relief. By evening, the mountain tightened again. Gao issued a new operations order stamped with municipal pre-approval. Filter maintenance blackout, wing C, 0210, next cycle. Mandatory, non-deferrable. Remote audit observers would monitor compliance metrics live. Perfect theater. He summoned Ben to the corridor outside control and held out a printed post assignment. "Outer gate only," Gao said. "No deviations. You are unarmed and under review. If you enter inner corridors during blackout, I call municipal enforcement myself." Ben took the sheet and folded it once. "Noted." Gao leaned in, voice low enough to miss ceiling mics. "You were good once, I hear. Don't ruin your last reference over a few pieces of bronze. Those pieces are older than both our careers." "History pays poorly," Gao said. "People pay well." He walked away before Ben answered. "At 2350, Doctor." Liao sent Ben a file transfer from a personal encrypted drive, not site network. Audio clips, message screenshots, and a typed statement signed with her private key naming 3 officials Gao had cited as buyer's intermediaries. Not proof of theft by itself, but motive web, coercion timeline, and pressure points. Ben duplicated it to 2 offline drives, sealed one in a specimen bag, and hid the second in the cavity behind a decommissioned fire panel only he knew opened with a quarter-turn hex. At 040, he made his own preparations with what access remained. He couldn't restore admin rights, but he could still reach electrical maintenance from a legacy panel in the old generator room. He mapped a manual reroute path to feed infrared cameras from backup battery strings during the blackout, if the breakers held. He couldn't legally command blast doors, but he found the mechanical override in Service Junction B had not yet been pinned like the others. One chance. He couldn't carry a sidearm. So he strapped a collapsible baton to his forearm and checked the zip ties in his pocket. At 2:02, Dr. Liao met him in the stairwell between levels, breath fogging in her mask from climbing fast. "They moved schedule forward 7 minutes," she said. "Blackout starts 2:03 now. Gao and Team 4 are already in Wing C. Then we're done waiting." She caught his sleeve before he turned. "If this fails, it already failed," he said. "Now we decide how much we recover." A beat. Then she released him and headed for records to open an external recording channel from her personal device, the only stream Gao hadn't fully controlled. Ben descended into generator level as lights above shifted from white to amber. The blackout had begun. He threw the first breaker. Nothing. Second breaker. Sparks, then a low thump as backup strings accepted load. On his handheld monitor, 2 infrared feeds blinked alive, grainy but usable. Rear service spine, junction to chamber 3. 2 heat signatures moving fast, each carrying a rectangular cold void that swallowed thermal detail. Lead-lined case. Ben ran. By the time he reached Service Junction B, the signatures were 30 meters from the blast door threshold. He dropped to the override wheel, braced, and started turning. Metal groaned, slow, stubborn, then began to slide. From above, through catwalk grating, he heard boots accelerating and Gao shouting his name. The door was halfway closed. The figures were almost through. The corridor lights flickered once, twice, and died completely. And died completely. For half a heartbeat, the mountain went silent, as if even the air handlers had stopped breathing. Then emergency strips snapped on in blood-red intervals along the floor, turning the service junction into a ribbed tunnel of shadow. Ben kept turning the override wheel until his shoulders burned. The blast door shuddered forward another 30 centimeters. On his handheld infrared feed, the 2 heat signatures split, one ducking low, one charging the narrowing gap with the lead-lined case angled sideways to wedge it open. "Drop it!" Ben shouted. The first contractor kicked a steel toolbox under the door. The second slammed the case against the edge. Metal screamed. The door jolted and held, 6 inches from fully shut. Boots pounded overhead on the catwalk grating. "Chen!" Gao's voice cracked through darkness. "Step away from the mechanism!" Ben yanked the wheel harder. The contractor nearest him lunged, gloved hands grabbing for Ben's face shield. Ben drove his elbow into the man's sternum, pivoted, and brought the baton across the attacker's wrist. Something clattered. Badge scanner, not a weapon. The man dropped to one knee, cursing. The other contractor abandoned the case and bolted back into the spine. Ben made a choice in less than a second. He stomped the wedged toolbox free, shoved the lead-lined case clear with both hands, and spun the wheel in one brutal pull. The blast door slammed. A deep lock thunk rolled down the corridor like artillery. One contractor was trapped on Ben's side, curled around his wrist and gasping. The second was now sealed inside the inner segment, with no exit except monitored hatches. Above, Gao appeared at the catwalk rail, silhouette cut by red strips. He had a pistol in his right hand. Not standard contractor issue. Ben looked once, registered muzzle angle, finger placement, distance to cover. Old math returned instantly. Put it down, Gao said. Now. Ben raised his empty left hand slowly, baton still hidden along his forearm. You fire in here, and every acoustic sensor wakes the whole site. That would be unfortunate, Gao said and smiled. For the unstable suspended guard violating contamination seals. He came down the side stairs 2 at a time, gun tracking Ben's chest. The trapped contractor on the floor scrambled backward and flattened himself against the wall. In Ben's earpiece, Dr. Liao whispered, breathless but steady, I have partial audio from your body cam. Video intermittent. I'm in records with external uplink open. Stay on, Ben murmured. Gao heard and barked. Who are you talking to? No one who'll help you, Ben said. Gao laughed once. You still think this is about me stealing a few bronzes? It's logistics, Chen. Demand exists. Institutions bleed. People adapt. He gestured with the gun toward the sealed door. Open it. Ben didn't move. Open it, Gao repeated, sharper. Or I shoot your knee and tell municipal enforcement you attacked a contamination team. Ben kept his breathing even. You're not here to shoot me. You're here to build a story. Gao's eyes narrowed. You finally understand. He stepped closer. Too close for safe firearm discipline. Close enough to grab. Here's the story. You broke protocol, assaulted contractors, and reached for my weapon. There was a struggle. Round discharge, panic, evacuation. In the confusion, chain of custody errors. Tragic. He angled the pistol down as if demonstrating where the bullet would go. Ben moved. Left hand slapped Gao's gun wrist outward. Right forearm snapped up under Gao's elbow. Baton edge drove into radial nerve. Gao snarled and fired reflexively. The shot punched sparks off the steel wall, deafening in the enclosed junction. Alarms detonated everywhere at once. Not just local. Full-sight firearm discharge detection. Gao recovered faster than most men, driving his shoulder into Ben and slamming him against the override wheel. Ben's spine lit with pain. Gao jammed the gun muzzle toward Ben's abdomen with both hands, trying to force the barrel into Ben's grip. Touch it, Gao hissed. Touch the gun. Ben clamped both hands over Gao's wrists instead, turning the muzzle up toward the catwalk. Another shot cracked, blowing out an emergency strip. Darkness deepened between red bars. In his earpiece, Dr. Liao's voice rose, now public channel loud and clear. Control recording active. This is Acting Director Liao. Timestamp 2:09:47. I am witnessing live armed coercion by contract lead Gao Ren in Service Junction B. Gao froze for a fraction of a second. Ben used it. He stepped across, trapped Gao's gun arm against his own chest, and dropped his weight into a shoulder lock. Ligaments strained. Gao screamed and lost grip. The pistol skidded under the blast door track. Both men went down hard. Gao punched at Ben's throat, caught armor instead, then clawed for Ben's eyes. Ben headbutted him once, controlled, enough to break rhythm, then rolled behind and cinched a rear restraint around Gao's neck and bicep. Stop resisting, Ben ground out. Gao bucked violently, heels hammering concrete. You think she can save you? He spat. She signed everything. I know, Dr. Liao said over open channel, voice shaking but audible site-wide. And I am providing full statement now. Silence on the channel for one stunned beat, then static as other listeners keyed in and were overridden by her director priority credential. Log this, she said. At my direction, duplicate records are transmitting to municipal investigators and Ministry Heritage Crimes Desk. I confirm unauthorized pressure, by Gao Ren to approve maintenance windows in Wing C under threat of exposing my prior data falsification. I name associated intermediaries: Customs Liaison He Chi Tao, Procurement Consultant Shu Mian, and buyer contact listed as Mr. Kestrel in encrypted messages recovered from my device. Gao went from rage to something colder. "You stupid—" Ben tightened the restraint and snapped a zip tie over Gao's right wrist, then left, then a second pair at the elbows for control. Non-lethal, precise, no blood. Behind them, the contractor trapped on Ben's side made a break for the side corridor. "Don't," Ben warned. The man ran. Ben stayed on Gao. "Unit available, respond junction B," he barked. No answer. Of course. Zhao was injured, others pinned by false contamination orders. So Ben hauled Gao to his knees himself, dragged him to the wall, and used his belt as an anchor around a conduit bracket. In the earpiece, Dr. Liao said, "Municipal dispatch acknowledged. ETA 12 minutes. They heard gunfire trigger." "Keep channel open," Ben said. "Read me the inner spine feed." "2 heat signatures. At sealed door section C," she replied immediately. "They're trying manual hatch. They have the second case." Ben looked at Gao. "Code to unlock section C." Gao spat blood onto the floor. "Go to hell." Ben crouched until they were eye level. "Your team is boxed between blast doors with an artifact case and fired rounds on record. You can still decide whether this ends with attempted homicide or armed trafficking conspiracy plus homicide attempt." Gao's lip twitched. "You won't shoot me." "I don't have to." He stood, grabbed the recovered pistol with a ragged evidence cloth from his pouch, and cleared the chamber. 2 rounds left. "Liao, route me to Section C manual override." "Sending map. Now." Ben ran. Section C sat 1 level down, accessible through a maintenance shaft, barely wider than his shoulders. He dropped into it, boots hitting ladder rungs slick with condensation, and came out behind a grated panel facing the inner side of the trapped corridor. 2 contractors were there, one cradling the lead-lined case, the other attacking the hatch control with a pry bar. When they saw him through the grate, both lunged. Ben fired no shots. He smashed the emergency purge lever instead. Compressed air burst from ceiling vents in a screaming white jet that staggered both men backward and dropped the pry bar. The case carrier slipped, hit the wall, and lost hold. The case thudded to the floor. Ben keyed the side gate, rushed in before they recovered, and drove the baton into one man's thigh. The man collapsed. The second swung wild with a wrench. Ben caught the wrist, rotated outward, and dislocated the shoulder with a sharp pop. Both down, both conscious, neither able to run. He zip-tied wrists and ankles, then kicked the wrench away. The case lay between them, matte gray, no markings. Ben scanned it with his handheld. Dense shielding, rectangular cavity. He didn't open it yet. Chain of custody first. "Liao," he said, breathing hard. "Visual on recovered case at Section C. Start evidence clock." Evidence clock started 2:14:31, she said. Her voice sounded different now, not less frightened, but aligned. "Ben." More footsteps inbound from North Stair. 3, maybe 4. Friendlies? Unknown. Ben dragged both detainees against the wall, baton up, and waited at the threshold. The footsteps hit the corner at a run. 3 municipal enforcement officers in gray tactical masks, carbines low-ready, plus 1 heritage crimes investigator in a plastic face shield. "Hands where we can see," the lead officer shouted. Ben dropped to one knee immediately, palms open. "Chief Security, Ben Chen, Yunshan. Weapon cleared and bagged at Junction B. 3 detainees, total plus contract lead, Gao Ren restrained. One lead-lined case recovered intact. The investigator's eyes flicked from Ben to the case, to the zip-tied contractors. Who discharged firearm? Gao Ren, Ben said. Recorded. In his earpiece, as if on cue, Dr. Liao spoke into the now citywide channel. I confirm. I have continuous audio and partial video from first contact. Uploading now. The lead officer nodded once. Stand by for cuffing and statement. Ben exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour and let them take control. No rescue had arrived in time to save him, but they had arrived in time to preserve what he'd held. By 3:20, the Necropolis command room looked like a courtroom built inside a server rack. Municipal evidence techs occupied every terminal. Yellow tags marked seized keyboards, badges, and 2 contractor tool cases with hidden compartments. The lid-lined case sat open under triple camera coverage. 11 bronze root tablets wrapped in inert paper, each stamped with excavation code BRZ-RTE/S9. One slot was empty. Dr. Liao stood at the end of the table in a disposable gown, mask off now, face drawn but unflinching. She had repeated her statement twice, once to enforcement, once to heritage crimes, with legal counsel patched in by speakerphone. She did not trim her own culpability. She named her falsification, the leverage, the approvals, the nights she signed because she was afraid. Across the room, Gao sat cuffed to a bolted chair between 2 officers, suit torn at the shoulder, hair matted with sweat. Even restrained, he radiated control attempts. You're making a procedural disaster, he told the investigator coolly. Contamination protocols were active. Any evidence from inner corridors is compromised. The investigator didn't look up. Funny thing about contamination, she said. It doesn't usually involve cloned badges and resin decoys. Gao pivoted to Ben as if the officers were furniture. You think this ends with me? You think buyers vanish because one frightened director grew a conscience? Ben stayed by the wall, wrists bruised, uniform streaked with grime. No, he said. I think it starts tonight. Gao smiled, blood on his teeth. Hero line. Write it down. He changed tactics again an hour later when they brought in digital forensics and confirmed deleted files were partially recoverable from mirrored storage nodes Gao hadn't known existed. His calm cracked into strategic fury. He demanded counsel. He demanded to speak with municipal superiors by name. He accused Dr. Liao of orchestrating theft and seducing Ben into fabricating logs. He claimed Ben assaulted him unprovoked in a PTSD episode. Normally, that might have muddied enough water to buy time, but Dr. Liao had anticipated the line. At 3:58, she requested direct access to the control room recording channel and, with investigator permission, played 3 clips in sequence. 1, Gao threatening Ben to normalize operations days earlier. 2, Gao's emergency bulletin invoking a fake bioaerosol spike without director authorization. 3, tonight's live audio. Gunshots, Gao hissing, "Touch the gun," Ben ordering him to stop resisting. In the silence after clip 3, even Gao's lawyer stopped typing. Then Dr. Liao added one more piece. A screen capture of insurance policy messages Gao had sent her from an encrypted app, detailing exactly how her mother's coverage could remain uninterrupted if she cooperated through audit week. The room went still in a different way. The heritage investigator looked at Gao with open disgust. You leveraged medical care to move funerary artifacts? Gao shrugged as far as cuffs allowed. I leveraged reality. At 4:22, a dispatch came in from City Customs. He Chi-Tao detained at his apartment with undeclared antiquities shipping forms. At 4:37, procurement consultant Shu Mian was picked up at a toll checkpoint with burner phones and matching payment ledgers. The network was unraveling faster than Gao could invent new stories. He sagged then. Not remorse, not collapse, just the first sign that probability had turned against him. "You'll still lose funding," he muttered to no one in particular. "Scandal always punishes the site." "Maybe," Dr. Liao said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "But not by lying tonight." At 5:10, municipal medics cleared Zhao Min for transfer to City Hospital. Ben walked beside the stretcher to the loading bay. Zhao's stitched hand was wrapped and elevated, eyes glassy with painkillers but lucid. "Chief," Zhao whispered as they paused at the ramp, "I'm sorry. I froze." Ben shook his head. "You challenged unauthorized access. You got hurt doing your job. That's not freezing." Zhao swallowed. "Did we keep them?" "We kept 11. We'll find the 12th. Zhao's mouth tightened in a tired nod. "Good." As the ambulance doors shut, dawn thinned the sky over Yunshan. The mountain looked scrubbed and indifferent, as if none of the night had happened. Inside, it had changed everything. At 7:30, after statements, evidence signatures, and 3 cups of bitter machine tea, Ben sat alone on the back steps near the old generator room, forearms on his knees, watching condensation bead on the rail. Adrenaline had drained, leaving tremor in his hands he tried to hide from himself. He heard footsteps and didn't turn until Dr. Liao sat beside him, close enough that their sleeves brushed. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she said, "I expected to feel relief. I mostly feel like I've been hollowed out." Ben let out a dry breath. "That's relief in first form." She gave him a sideways look, almost a smile. "You make everything sound like field manual language." "It helps." He glanced at her. "You were very good in there. I was terrified in there. Both can be true." She looked down at her hands. The nitrile gloves were gone. Faint crescent marks from the cuffs of PPE remained on her wrists. "When I said those names on channel," she said quietly, "I thought, this is the moment my mother loses treatment." Ben shifted, fully facing her now. "I checked before I came out here. Municipal emergency witness protection includes temporary medical continuity for immediate family in coercion cases. Investigator Tan filed it under your statement." Her head snapped up. "You checked?" "First thing after evidence lock." She covered her mouth with her hand, not crying exactly, more like the body refusing to choose one emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. Ben stared out at the mist for a second, then said, "I need to tell you something before inquiry does." She waited. "I disobeyed direct orders, broke contamination seals, used force while under armed suspension. I'd do it again. But there'll be penalties." "I know. And when they ask, I won't minimize your role to protect you. I also won't maximize it to protect myself." She turned toward him, eyes red-rimmed but clear. "Good. Don't protect me with lies. I'm done being protected that way." He nodded once. Another silence, softer this time. Then Dr. Liao said, "I have spent months telling myself you were rigid because you needed control. Tonight I realized you're precise because you've seen what happens when facts blur." Ben's jaw tightened. "Facts blurred got people killed where I served." She reached, hesitated, then placed her hand over his. "You didn't fail tonight." He looked at their hands, at the tiny tremor still running through his fingers under hers. "Feels like I failed for 6 weeks before tonight. And then you stopped it." Her voice dropped. "With me. Not alone." He met her gaze and held it. In the corridor behind them, an officer called her name. She didn't move immediately. "Ben," she said very quietly, "if we survive inquiry with our jobs and our reputations partially intact, I don't want to go back to pretending this is only professional respect." He blinked once, as if bracing for impact of a different kind. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want honesty," she said. "And I want to know whether the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention is real, or just another tactical assessment." He let out something that might have been a laugh and might have been exhaustion. "Liao, half the time I look at you, I'm trying not to say anything reckless in a room with microphones." Her mouth curved despite herself. "That's not an answer." He turned his hand under hers and laced their fingers, deliberate. No ambiguity left. "It's real," he said. "It has been for a while. I didn't act on it because this site was already compromised, and you were my acting director, and I am very good at suppressing bad timing." She squeezed his hand. "And now?" "Now timing is still bad," he said. "But I am tired of treating every human feeling like an operational risk." She exhaled shakily, as if she had been holding that breath for months. "Good, because I'm tired too." The officer called again, closer. Dr. Liao stood, then leaned down and pressed her forehead briefly to his. An intimate gesture, small and steady. "Come find me after debrief," she murmured. "I will." She walked back inside, carrying her fear and her choices in plain view. Ben stayed on the steps another minute, watching dawn finally break over the pines. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like punishment he had to outlast. It felt like work he might choose. 3 weeks later, the inquiry hearing room in Municipal Building C smelled of disinfectant and old paper. Ben sat at the witness table in service uniform, suspension notice folded in his breast pocket like a second ID. Across from him, the review panel included internal affairs, heritage protection, labor compliance, and one stern woman from budget oversight who looked offended by everyone equally. "Mr. Chen," the chair said, "did you violate direct command restriction by entering Wing C during declared contamination event?" "Yes." "Did you break sealed contamination hardware?" "Yes." "Did you engage in physical force while unarmed suspension order was active?" "Yes." "No hedging? No performance?" Counsel slid a printout forward. "Why should this panel view those as justified rather than reckless?" Ben looked at the microphone, then at the panel. "Because the contamination event was fabricated to mask artifact theft. Because delay would have resulted in permanent loss of state heritage objects and possible destruction of coffin seals to conceal chain of custody. Because I used minimum force necessary, avoided lethal discharge, and preserved evidence integrity until municipal arrival." He didn't mention nightmares, didn't mention penance. Facts were enough here. Dr. Liao testified after him. She accepted formal penalties for data falsification and coercion concealment without excuse, and she described, in exact timestamps, when Ben warned her when she failed to act and when she chose to go on record. At the end of the day, the panel recessed. 2 hours later, they returned with decisions read into record. Ben, 2-week unpaid suspension already served, reinstated, promoted to Chief of Integrated Tomb Security pending policy reform implementation. Dr. Liao, 6-month administrative probation, mandatory external compliance oversight, retained as acting director until permanent appointment review. Contract security with Gao's firm, terminated. Site modernization grant, conditionally approved with expanded anti-tamper architecture. Outside the building, light rain turned the steps slick. Ben found Dr. Liao under a narrow awning, mask in one hand, hearing packet in the other. Well, she said, we are both professionally humbled. He snorted softly. Could be worse. She lifted the packet. It says I have to co-sign your new layered monitoring plan. Try not to forge my signature this time. She stared at him for one deadpan second, then laughed. Full, surprised, human. People passing under umbrellas glanced over. When her laughter faded, she said, Dinner tonight? Not in an office, not during a crisis. Actual dinner. Ben nodded. Yes. Good. She stepped closer, rain misting the edge of her hair. Because I meant what I said on the generator steps. I don't want halfway. Neither do I. They kissed there under the municipal awning, brief and sure, rain tapping metal above them like distant static finally resolving into signal. The reopened necropolis sounded different with visitors back. Muted tour shoes in daytime, conservation carts at dusk, two-way radios layered over climate control hum at night. At 2100, Ben stood in control with three younger guards arrayed around him and Chamber 3 feeds tiled across the wall. Again, he said, pointing at the screen. If UV shutter rotation and thermal occlusion match this pattern, it is not a body crossing. You verify against reflective surfaces and secondary corridor pressure before triggering full response. One trainee frowned. So ghosts are still off the table? Ben gave him a look. Ghosts don't clone badges. Laughter, brief and nervous. Good. Learning stuck better with oxygen. On Monitor 6, new software flagged badge anomalies in amber. On Monitor 7, maintenance log edits required dual key approval. Security and conservation together. The old blind spots in the service spine now held staggered infrared nodes with tamper alarms that screamed if a cable even loosened. In chamber-adjacent quarantine, a single empty slot remained in a foam case, tablet 12, still unrecovered. Beneath it, a printed card now read, Missing. Active investigation instead of quietly vanishing from inventory. No second theft of record. At 2310, Dr. Liao entered control carrying 2 paper cups of tea and no pretense. Break, she announced to the trainees. Chief's orders. They scattered gratefully. She handed Ben a cup and leaned against the console. Customs recovered tablet 12, she said. Harbor warehouse, false bottom crate of machine parts. Investigator Tan sent photos. Ben exhaled through his nose, something loosening in his shoulders. All 12. All 12. He touched his cup lightly against hers in a silent toast. Down the corridor, lights dimmed to conservation night mode. Not from power theft or sabotage, but by schedule. Ben and Dr. Liao walked their round together through stone halls that still held old cold and lacquer scent and the weight of 2,000 years. At Chamber 3, they paused at the reinforced glass, 17 sealed coffins gleaming dark under controlled light. Months ago, Ben had stood here alone, treating every shadow like judgment. Tonight, he keyed his light lower, then handed the flashlight to a trainee waiting behind him. Your sweep, he said. The trainee nodded, steadier than before, and stepped forward. Ben remained at the gate with Dr. Liao beside him. Not as penance, not as exile, but as chosen duty shared in plain sight, while the mountain kept its silence, and for once, it felt like trust.